Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, a daily tech podcast where we delve into the technology that will transform businesses tomorrow. Today. Now, when I first started this podcast and writing my tech columns, it was because I wanted to create an alternative to the tech hype circle that seemed to consist of new iPhone, new Samsung, rumours, specs, release, review, and then rinse, wash and repeat. So I wanted to provide a platform where we could speak with the startup founders and CEOs from industries all over the world to see exactly how technology is bringing us all closer together, transforming our lifestyle, the world of business, and maybe, just maybe, make the world a better place along the way too. Yes, I'm guilty of being another tech idealist, but when recording a daily podcast, even I am guilty of bombarding you all with those same dreaded buzzwords at the moment, such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain, crypto, IoT, personalised experiences, and the list goes on and on. But rest assured, I'm still passionate about digging below those buzzwords to find the real gold, and how some businesses are leveraging future technologies today to transform businesses and help them find their way in a digital world. And a company that recently appeared on my radar is Lannister Holdings and Lannister Development, which is the first US publicly traded blockchain development company in the market today. Their team of experienced programmers, developers and software engineers have been helping businesses leverage the web since the arrival of the internet in the 90s. Although Web 2.0 provided a vision for the art of the possible, they're now helping take businesses to the next level on a journey to Web 3.0, but at their pace. Essentially, they're leveraging 3.0 technologies for a secure, transparent and decentralized world and the future of your business. So for any CEOs listening, they will know that enterprises are not just looking for Web 3.0, they're asking for digital transformation of their business. But that is just the start of their journey, and Web 3.0 is their final destination. Now, everyone needs a strategy and a roadmap to get to the intelligent web, and when IoT inevitably becomes ubiquitous, what underpins it? AI delivers the intelligence, and blockchain gives it the mechanism for security and transparency. But again, this is only the beginning. So if you're passionate about how technology is transforming the world of business, and more interested in tangible results rather than buzzwords, you should love today's episode. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way back to the US so we can speak with Joe Snyder and Chris Brown from Lannister Holdings. So a massive warm welcome to the show, guys. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. I'm Joseph Snyder. I'm the CEO of Lannister Holdings and Lannister Development, and we are a blockchain and Web3 technology company. We're focused on building out products, specifically in the fintech space, with a subset focus on syndicated real estate finance and real estate investment vehicles, as well as our client-facing work with Lannister Development to work with post-ICO companies and enterprise companies and startups who are looking at how blockchains and IoT and some of these, next generation of technologies can come in and disrupt systems and build out tools and new ideas. So we're a publicly traded company in the United States. We did a reverse merger in March to go public on the OTC market. So we're traded in the U.S. under the ticker symbol NBDR, Nancy Bravo Delta Robert. And with that, I'll let Chris Brown, our CTO, introduce himself as well.
Yeah, hey everyone, I'm Chris Brown, CTO of Lannister Holdings. I think Joe did a pretty good overview of what it is we're doing and what we're trying to achieve. We want to be in front of Web 3.0 and build the future of technology and the next iteration of the internet.
Excellent. Now, before we begin, I think, first of all, a huge congratulations must go out to you, Joe, for your recent appearance in Entrepreneur as one of today's top entrepreneurs and visionaries. I mean, that's got to be pretty cool, right?
It is. It is very cool, and I'm extremely grateful to be listed and to be named, and for the work that we're doing and the vision that we see about how these technologies impact and disrupt the future is very, very cool, and it's an absolute honor. And in addition to that, in the same week, which was last week, Chris Brown was actually a contributing author in another piece, another article for Entrepreneur Magazine as well. So we got some congratulations there for him as well.
Fantastic. Sorry I left you out there, Chris. Now, when I first heard your name, Lannister, I've got to admit, it reminded me of two things. One, of an old regal world of finance, and of course, Game of Thrones. I mean, what is the story behind the name? I mean, was there an intention to use a name that conjures up a kind of a mixture between that traditional aristocracy, but also using technology to change that world with a new way of thinking and doing things? Or am I way off the mark there?
No, that's pretty close. I mean, there's definitely a pop culture reference that we wanted, and an aura that we wanted to capture with that. But I think that you really nailed it. Our vision for the name, we had a bunch of different names on these different lists, and the team played with a bunch of different things and distilled it down to this. And what we were going for was this idea of bridging old world traditional finance, old world regulation, existing regulation, and business structure with a future generation of things, and really merging those two things together. And that's been a core ideology of ours from the very beginning. It's a reason why we decided to go public on the OTC market as opposed to going to an ICO or an STO, offering out a token, something like that, which is well within our capability of things to do from a technological perspective. And, but that idea that these regulatory structures already exist, these frameworks already exist, that allow companies like ours to access tranches of funding in the future, to have various stakeholders, to have these expandable and scalable legal structures, that those things already exist. And we believe that we can help improve them and help disrupt them by utilizing them and honoring the reasons why the regulations exist and the reason why protections and rules and things exist inside of the business world.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned going public there, because with over 600 interviews on this podcast, I speak to many companies in the blockchain space. But what immediately stood out for me was this isn't just another blockchain company or another project. Lannister Development is the first US-based publicly traded blockchain development company in the market today, which is an incredibly cool USP to have. So can you tell me more about why you chose that route and why it's so important to you and the challenges that you've come across along the way as a result?
Sure, that's a long conversation. So, we chose this path, as I just said, because what we saw was a really scalable opportunity for us and our disparate backgrounds around traditional business, around bootstrapping things, around, scaled risk management business, where you have multiple regulators and you're dealing with many different sets of regulation, as well as our experience in these technologies and our team's experience in continuous delivery and continuous development. And that gave us a viewpoint that we thought was very, very unique. What we believe is the impacts and the future scalability of blockchain technologies, distributed ledgers, consensus algorithms, IoT infrastructure, how 5G works in with all of that, and how this creates a new iteration and a new version of the internet and of commerce and of how we interact with these things. And that viewpoint was something that Chris and I and Cynthia and some other members of our team really honed in on. We identified some products that we saw as impactful, value-adding, great product market fit, specifically inside of real estate finance. And we also saw the real scale potential from the development side and the consultative development and the integration side of how do companies, how do organizations, how do governments utilize these technologies? How do they integrate with existing infrastructure? How do they integrate with existing clouds and existing data sets and all of that? And those viewpoints really allowed us to see a very, very, very blue ocean from a competition standpoint and a very scaled market to go to market to. And those are the things that I believe, and I'm not a tech guy, right? I'm the business, I'm the business guy, and I'm surrounded by people like Chris and Jonathan Parnell and just the most brilliant technical people, which is beautiful. But, looking at it from the business side, I really saw a very, very clear, scalable, impactful opportunity that we could go to market with, right? And to have a public company, in my opinion, that's really the first thing that you need. You really have to be able to identify that this is something that you can take and grow at, true impact scale, because that's what's, your stakeholders are there to make sure is and they're hoping happens, right? They're investing in our business, they're investing in our company, they're buying our stock, and they're coming along for that journey and saying, we see what you see, we see that you guys have the team to build it, and we want to invest in that and go along for that journey. And our job is to make sure that when we've taken that proposition to market, when we're having that conversation with stakeholders, that we really have a clear path to scale and to impact. So that's a huge reason why we chose to go public. Another piece of that is that, again, we were looking at the realities of the industry at the time, and this was middle of 2017. The ICO market was really hot. There was not a lot of regulatory guidance from the SEC yet. Even in the US, there was still this kind of Wild West atmosphere around the token generation sales and those fundraising avenues that were open at the time. And we didn't feel like there was enough security and protection for the understanding, right? We didn't want to be the guys that got a knock on the door from the SEC a year after doing an ICO saying, hey, you got to give us back like $30 million plus interest, right? So I don't think that's a great day. So in looking at it like that, we really wanted to utilize a structure that had a lot of existing regulation and had a lot of existing participation and market participation in a way that would allow us to clearly communicate our vision, clearly communicate our value proposition, and also have that ability to scale with stakeholders.
And obviously, I'm quite fortunate to speak with people in the blockchain industry every single day. But when I speak to people outside of the tech community, especially about things like blockchain, I often feel like somewhat of a heretic, with a look in their eyes. And I think many businesses actually just want to learn more about this technology and how it can remove inefficiencies and increase profits, but they just don't know where to turn. So can you tell me more about your customers, what kind of problems they come to you with, and also how you're helping them at the moment?
Yeah, so we serve forward-thinking executives and founders who want to differentiate themselves. They want to be recognized as visionaries, but not whimsical. I think that's kind of that thing you just said, right?
Yeah.
There's still this, wait, is it Bitcoin? How does that work? question. And they're looking for a guide to challenge them to understand and create new technologies that propel them or their company or their division within a company or their startup to the forefront of their industry and to the forefront of the next wave of things, right? And so, that's really who we're focused on serving. That encompasses folks like people that are post ICO. There's a lot of companies out there that have had successful, fundraising events and ICOs, onshore, offshore, whatever that may be, right? We weren't there for that, but they've had these successful events. They went through this process, and now they're looking around the room 9 months later or whatever, their token valuation isn't necessarily where they'd like it to be. Their product, deliverable schedule, isn't where they want it to be. They haven't maybe gotten their MVP through market or haven't gotten their platform finished. And we're able to come in and, help those companies fulfill their mission and fulfill their promises to their stakeholders by delivering those technologies, by hitting those milestones, by coming in and acting as a strategic partner to build out the tools and the technologies that they were looking to build out, or that, pieces of which they may be missing. And also integrating that with a really, consistent and concise and accurate, messaging and social strategy to tell their story as those pieces get developed. So that's one segment. The other segment is the startup world, where we're consulting with companies that are looking at, does this do this the way that I think it does, and is this a product that works the way that I think it does based on my experience, and hey, what does this do? And then the other side of that is enterprise, right? The large organizations and global conglomerates and companies that are looking at blockchain and saying, we think this works here, and here within our organization, or here in our supply chain, or here in our payments ecosystem, or here in our royalty ecosystem, but we don't necessarily understand how it all integrates, right? So it's almost a DevOps kind of a conversation there, where you're, going in and and digging into the infrastructure of the organization and coming out with some MVP cases and some test cases that they might be able to do at a fairly low risk factor, at a fairly low cost factor, especially based on the size of the organization, and come out with some actionable implemented technologies and tools to move them forward.
I'm so glad you mentioned the Bitcoin comment there, because people do want to just lump that in straight away. And I think it's so important to point out that you're not a crypto company, you're a tech and a development company. And what really fascinates me about what you guys are doing is, yes, blockchain is a game-changing technology, but your team actually spend time with clients, first of all, to understand how they can reduce management costs, intermediaries between supply chains, and also help them overcome more, and also help them become more secure, transparent, and reduce risks and costs. And only when you've built that picture do you then begin to look at the technology and the development side to help reach those objectives. I mean, was that always your intention? And do you think that too many businesses go straight into tech or straight into solution mode before understanding the problems and those business objectives?
I think it really depends on the business. It's hard to lump them all together and say too many go straight to tech or solution. I think most people that are operating at a decent scale already understand that the solution to a problem only comes after you've very well identified the problem and identified potential routes to a solution. But we do get a lot of people who, there's a lot of people who out there who just want to launch a token event or want to launch their own cryptocurrency because they've seen that, a lot of other people have made way too much money doing such a thing. And, the SEC or whatever regulatory body is in the country of the person launching these things is probably going to come say hi to them in the next 6 to 18 months. But that's not our focus, right? Just like you said, Bitcoin is not where we're going with this thing. It's not what we're interested in. The actual use cases around the technologies behind these are what's actually interesting. And there's a lot of technologies there, right? I mean, we keep using the word blockchain and blockchain and blockchain. And every time I talk about this, every meeting that we have, every podcast that we do, all these things, we have to kind of explain the point that there is blockchain, right? There is the actual blockchain. There's a chain of blocks of data, and they're tracked and immutable and distributed and decentralized. But there's all these pieces around that, right? You have the consensus algorithms, you have the distributed computing, you have all these other pieces, which are technological pieces, which have their own solutions, their own problem sets, their own integrations, right? So, just the consensus algorithms alone change the way that many things work. I mean, look at the way swarm robotics works. That's multiple entities working on a consensus. Well, these consensus algorithms, these blockchain technologies, these distributed ledgers, these distributed decision making properties of these systems really bring strength to something that isn't even necessarily in the wheelhouse of what people are thinking about when they think of cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and token sales and all these things, right? So there's an entire world of this technology that's very far away from just the finance end of it. It's just that the finance end of it is what gets, it's what is in the news cycle, because the price of Bitcoin is a very easy thing to write about.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that as well, because to many people that just read those headlines, they're just going to think that there is this silver bullet, this one size fits all blockchain, and it really isn't as simple as that. So if we do have any CEO or a business leader listening to us talk now who wants to begin to identify their pain points and explore how these emerging technologies such as blockchain and all the others can transform their business, can you just help paint a picture to help them visualize a scenario that you've actually helped a client with, or maybe even a use case?
Yes. So one of our internal use cases is the idea of, syndicated real estate finance. Specifically, right now, things that we're working on are around real estate development investment, master limited partnerships, things like that, and specifically in the state of Arizona. But, the reason that we're able to identify those value points is that what we're looking at is the traditional structure of not just the fundraising event to get a project off the ground, but also the post-fundraising management and expenses of operating these types of vehicles into the future. If you have a real estate investment vehicle like a master limited partnership, and that brings in $20 million in order to acquire real estate assets that generate rental incomes, there is an entire amount of cost savings to be had by utilizing blockchain technologies, token generation, those kinds of things for the fundraising event. But we're looking at it from the longer term perspective of how does a blockchain product, how does a platform offer people who are syndicating master limited partnerships, who are putting together syndication funds to do real estate development, how does it allow them to move forward operating on a token system, on a blockchain that allows them to reduce costs and reduce risk and add transparency to their stakeholders and about their process? Because the fact of the matter is that if you can cut 0.25% or 0.5% off of a 30-year investment vehicle from the fees side, from the cost basis side of actually just transacting the insurance operations and the tax payments and the rental collection and the dividend payouts, and there's all of these interaction points where smart contracts and blockchain use cases come in and really deliver a clear value add and a clear benefit to a system like that.
Now, there is a lot of talk about Web 3.0 right now. So for anyone that is listening that is completely unaware of this term, can you just offer an overview of exactly what it is and the role that Lannister is playing in that transformation?
Yeah, so Web 2.0 as an idea is sort of the web of information, right? It's the internet of Airbnb and Uber, and how can everybody participate and start becoming individualized actors in this ecosystem that is the internet, right? How can we get away from just Amazon having everything and then you actually being able to sell inside Amazon? So Web 3.0 is the next iteration of that. It's how do I own my data? How do I own everything that I'm doing? How do I own the piece that I want to sell, right? Because if I go put my apartment on Airbnb, I own my apartment and I get that rental income, but I'm using a centralized platform in order to do that, right? Somebody has to create and manage this platform, and I have to pay that person to manage that platform. Web 3.0 is about, can we decentralize these pieces? Can we make these networks more ad hoc? Can we grow this to be a thing where I can connect to you directly and do a transaction with you, whatever that transaction may be, and not have to have intermediaries, not have to have third parties, not have to have large organizations that manage and transact everything for us. Now, there's a lot of issues there, right? Third parties give you a lot of ability to not know who the other person is and not have to trust them, right? So let's say escrow in a real estate transaction. There's a reason that there's an escrow company there. There's a reason that there's a company who stands in the middle, takes my money, takes your deed to your property, and switches them for us. Yeah, there's a lot of value there. There's a lot of reduction of need of trust and a lot of reduction of risk for both parties. Is there a way that we can do that without having third-party middlemen, without having the risk and overhead and error-prone, risk of human error involved in those transactions? And that's sort of the overarching idea of Web 3.0, is that we can do that. We can decentralize these systems. We can create peer-to-peer networks that are shared among unlimited number of people. And then from that, we can gain a lot of personal power. We can gain a lot of personal freedom in the way that we manage our transactions, our lives, our data, our identity, right? Because as we're moving forward in this internet thing, and again, I have air quotes going on here, people feel that they've lost a lot of what they believe to be their personal identity or their personal, I'd say the word freedom, though it doesn't exactly fit what I'm looking for here. Facebook has had a lot of issues in the past 2 years because everybody realizes that Facebook knows absolutely everything about them and can put ads in front of them that they don't actually want to see, and that makes them very uncomfortable, right? Facebook owns your data, and that's their business model. Their data, your data is now their data. So how do we change that? How do we move past that? How do we make people feel comfortable again using technologies and using these tools? And I think that's sort of the basis of this whole Web 3.0 change. And then you move up into the next level of that, which is enterprise and large-scale software development, large-scale systems. And you start to say, what are the benefits here? Are there pieces here that benefit these large systems? Because if enterprise itself, if government essentially isn't benefiting from these new technologies, then we're going to have a lot of problems getting them implemented, right? Because if the large players in the space don't benefit from the new technologies, they're not going to have any incentive to use the new technologies. So how do they benefit? Do they benefit? Is this good for them as well? Or do they lose out because, they no longer get to accept everybody's personal data? And the truth is that they benefit quite a bit depending on who you define as they, right? If you define they as Facebook and their usage of my personal data as their business model, then no, they don't benefit. But in my mind, they shouldn't benefit. They shouldn't get to sell my data. But if you look at banks, if you look at large institutions, if you look at any insurance companies, if you look at some of the largest entities in the world, they have ongoing, constant, and daily transactions in the millions and potentially billions of dollars that benefit from faster, more secure, more timely systems. So you get to look at, what is the cost of a day inside a transaction? Not even necessarily, what is the actual cost of the transaction, but what is the cost of a delay if a large shipping company has to wait 30 days to get their money? How much does that 30 days cost them? And what happens to their balance sheet if you take that 30 days and make it 1 day, or make it 1 hour, or make it immediate upon delivery? That changes the way they operate their business entirely. It changes the way they manage their money, and it changes the amount of interest that they make on any float that they have at any given moment. So there's a lot of upcoming technologies around this space that we're going to call Web 3.0. But really, it's just a massive network of how do we create something more distributed, more accessible, more transparent than what we currently have, without losing the power of the networks that we have. Because the network effect, the power effect of networks is incredible, right? It's changed the world completely in the last 10 or 15 years, maybe 20 years. And every single year we're seeing an exponential growth in the speed of these transitions and the speed of these technologies and the way that they're changing everything about what we do. So how do we leverage into that? How do we maintain that? How do we maintain security and transparency and trust in a system that's growing at such a rate that most people can't keep up? You have to be studying basically full time to have a good understanding of what is happening with technology. And that's something that most people don't have the time to do. So that comes back to, people like us here at Lannister Development. We need to know how these technologies work, how they impact the sectors that we're looking at, and what we can do with them to increase usability for everybody involved and increase efficiencies, decrease costs, and decrease risks at any point that we can manage.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying there. And as well, a lot of the technologies that we're discussing today, yes, it's true that they're in their infancy at the moment, but we are living in an era of hyper change. And as fast as it's going right now in these exponential times, I think there's also a realization that it's never going to be this slow again. So when researching you guys, I quickly came across a quote from, I think it was Joe, and you said how the reality is in 3 years from now, companies will not want to do business with those that cannot provide greater security, that cannot provide smart contracts and greater transparency. I mean, can you expand on that point and how expectations are already beginning to change both in our personal and our corporate life?
Yeah, I just believe that as a business person, as a libertarian, as a I guess I'd say capitalist, that the cream rises to the top. And what I mean by that is that when there is a better way, when there is a way that is more secure, when there is a way that has more transparency and lower costs and less risk, that humans, business, capital, talent, resources will flow towards that better way at greater and greater and greater rates. And that's just a fact of the business ecosystem. And if you're offering out middle market, transactions, if you have a bunch of middlemen and you've got a system where it's not very secure and it does require a lot of middlemen and it is expensive and it's not very transparent and these technologies can fit within it, then, do you want to be Netflix or do you want to be Blockbuster?
Absolutely. So I've got to ask then, what are your immediate goals for the next 12 months? And equally, what's your grand vision for Lannister?
Those are great questions. So our immediate goals are to bring the syndicated finance platform product to market. We have some immediate things that we're working on to be pushing a portion of that tranche as an open source, and then we're looking at how we integrate those platforms and bring some of these pieces to market with both internally from a development and product standpoint, and also externally with partnerships. So that's in the immediate goal set. Another of our immediate goals over the next 12 months is to scale out our work with post-ICO startup and enterprise companies who are continuing to look at blockchain and who are beginning to adopt and integrate and test and ideate these things. Our grand vision is to build a scaled technology company that is really at the bleeding edge of what is the next iteration and what is the current best practice and best tool on the market, that is a company focused on remote work. It is a company focused on lifestyle by design for our staff and for our stakeholders. And it is a company focused on building and owning and deploying the technologies that the future is built on. We want to command a significant market share of global blockchain and Web3 development and integrations work. We want to own a very, very nice library of information and of intellectual property assets around these technologies and these spaces. And, we want to work with amazing and interesting use cases and clients to get there.
Fantastic. Now, for anyone searching for you online, as we talk today, they're going to come across probably two websites. We have Lannister Holdings and Lannister Development. So can you just walk the listeners through how they can find you, learn more about the company itself, your processes, and also how they can reach a member of your team and find the information that they're looking for?
Absolutely. So we're super easy to find. LannisterHoldings.com, LannisterDevelopment.com. If you are a founder or an executive and you want more information, if you have an association or if you have any kind of a blockchain integration or development or consultation question, please go to LannisterDevelopment.com. Submit your information there. One of our team will get right back to you. We love having those conversations, and those are a lot of fun. Additionally to that, I'm on Twitter at Lannister CEO. The company's on Twitter at Lannister Dev, and you can find us all on LinkedIn, Lannister Holdings. All the staff is listed there, so we're pretty easy to find. And then, of course, the market. Our ticker symbol is NBDR. You can Google us on Google, and we are publicly traded in the US.
Well, I love what you guys are doing. I think there's so many businesses now hearing words like Web 3.0 and blockchain technology. But having listened to you there, it's not just about that. It's about using technology or leveraging technology to reduce those management costs, remove those middlemen and between supply chains, and also help them become more secure, transparent, and reduce risks and costs, essentially helping businesses find their way in a digital world, which is a fantastic thing. So a big thank you for coming on today.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Before inviting the transformative tech revolution into your business, we need to invest time to understand those unique problems and those requirements. And my takeaway from chatting to the guys at Lannister today was that they can set the strategy, design the framework to fit the strategy, and build the required components. Essentially, this is your opportunity to claim an industry-leading position for unparalleled success, not only today, but for years to come too. And what I loved about chatting with Chris and Joe today is, yes, we're talking about complex technologies, and yes, we dropped a few buzzwords such as Web 3.0 and blockchain. But today we dug deeper to find out what these technologies will bring to businesses. And anyone that has ever taken a company public will know all about the challenges and regulatory compliances. For those reasons alone, I salute them for being the first US-based publicly traded blockchain development company in the market today. But what are your thoughts? How do you see Web 3.0 evolving and transforming the digital landscape? And what part is your business going to play in that? Email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, tweet me at Neil C. Hughes, or if you're feeling particularly medieval, maybe send a raven. Now, after giving this a little thought, I do find myself thinking of Tyrion Lannister and his line, "A Lannister always pays his debts." And the more I think about their name, it conjures up positive images like that. But enough of my late night rambles and the inner workings of my crazy mind. Thanks to Joe and Chris for taking the time to come on today, and thanks to every one of you for tuning in. But I'm afraid it's time for me to go now. So until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.